Hey everyone, this is Rosie. Today I have a tutorial for you where we will be sewing the Swoon Sydney Crossbody bag. This is my first time making this bag, so come sew along with me. If you'd like to purchase the pattern, I have a link in the video description below. So let's get started. First, I want to talk about preparing your pattern pieces, preparing your fabrics, and then marking your pattern pieces onto your fabrics. So first up, I have the pattern pieces already printed out, and to print out your pattern pieces, refer to the pattern itself. They give you very good instructions on how to print this out on your printer. There's a 2-inch registration square on that pattern, and once you've printed out your pieces, you have to make sure that that registration square measures 2 inches square. That will ensure that you've printed out your pieces the correct size. But refer to the pattern for the instructions on how to do that, because they do give very good instructions. Once I have printed out my pattern, I take my full sheets, my 8.5 by 11 sheets, and I cover them with contact paper. And I cover both sides of the sheet, both the front and the back. And the contact paper makes my pattern piece very durable, and it also gives me a pretty nice edge to trace around. And I am using just good old-fashioned contact paper to do that. So it's self-adhesive and you get a pretty good amount on a roll, and I did choose the matte finish for this. And then after I cover all the 8.5 by 11 sheets, I cut out all my pieces. Now for the fabric itself, I take my yardage and I actually fuse all of my pieces with some woven interfacing. And I'm actually using the woven fuse, and I will put a link below to the website where you can purchase this. And I cover the entire amount of the fabric. So for example, this is a 1 yard piece of fabric. I cover the entire piece. And that's my preference. I did deviate a little bit from what the pattern tells you to do, but I like to have the woven interfacing on all of the fabric pieces. And then this is my main fabric. I did the same thing. I completely fused this with the woven fuse. And then for the trim pieces, I'm just using some cork fabric. In the pattern, she tells you if you're using vinyl, do not cover your pieces with any woven interfacing. And with the cork, same thing. I am not going to cover this with the woven fuse. And then for marking, I'm going to use the Pilot friction pens. This will be my first time using it, but I've heard good things about it. It does have a very fine tip for marking, and it will erase when you iron it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out all my pattern pieces, and then we'll come back for the next step. I have all of my pieces cut out, and you want to make sure that you cut out all of the pieces at the back of the printed pattern. Now in addition, there are other pieces that you need to cut out, and you will find what those pieces are and their measurements at the top of page 2. Now the only way that I have deviated from the pattern is as far as the interfacing is concerned. Instead of Shape Flex, I'm using woven fuse. Instead of Thermolam Plus, I'm using Decovil Light, and instead of Peltex, I'm using Decovil Heavy. And if you're interested in using these interfacings that I've used, I'll put a link in the video description below where you can purchase them. Now another way that I have deviated from the pattern is that I put my woven interfacing on all of my pieces. As I showed you before, I pre-fuse my fabric before I cut it with the woven interfacing, and then I go ahead and cut out my pattern. The only place that I did not put the woven interfacing on is on my cork pieces. Those are my contrast pieces. Now if you don't want to put the woven fuse on all the pieces as I have, she does tell you at the top of page 2 which pieces require the woven. Now, the other thing that I like to do is I like to put a sticky note on all of my pieces so that I don't have to be hunting around trying to figure out which piece is which. I mark everything very clearly. Now I'm not going to go over the cutting of every single piece. You can find those instructions very clearly in the printed pattern. This video is really about constructing the bag. So let's get started with the construction. I'm going to be following the printed pattern step by step as it's written. Now the first thing that we need to do is to mark the zipper opening on our fleece. And instead of using the fleece, I'm using the Decovil Light. And I have not pre-fused any of the Decovil to my pattern pieces yet. So with the Decovil Light, there's a shiny, smooth side, that's the adhesive side, and then there's a rough side. We want to mark on the rough side. So we're going to mark a box that's 2 3/4 inches down from this edge here. And to do that, I'm going to be using that Pilot pen. Now, one thing you need to know about these Pilot pens, they were actually not created for sewing purposes, but sewers like them because they're heat sensitive. So as soon as I put my hot iron on this mark on my fabric, the mark will disappear. But what you also need to know is that it's also cold sensitive. So if your bag were in an environment, say, where you dropped below 10 degrees, your marks would come back. So I recommend that you only use this where you're going to cut. So I'm going to take my ruler and we will mark 2 3/4 inches down from this straight edge. You want this to be really nice and straight. Okay, so there's the first mark. And then we want to mark 1 inch down from the mark that we just created. So line your ruler up. And the box needs to be 10 inches wide, so what we need to do is find the center of this little panel here. And it's 14 inches wide, so I'm just going to put a little mark at 7 inches. And then I will mark out 5 inches from each side of that mark. Again, make sure that you're lining your grid line up with your piece. And I'm going to mark out 5 inches from this side. After you've finished marking your box, you want to cut it out, and after you cut it out, you're going to take one of the main panel lining pieces and you're going to fuse the Decoville to the back side of this piece. So when you do that, it's really important that the two straight edges at the top are perfectly aligned with each other. If not, your zipper opening will be crooked. I just finished fusing the Decoville to the main lining panel. Now this is the one where we cut out a little box for our zipper pocket. Now with the Decoville I do go all the way out to the edges, so it is going over the seam lines. And this piece right now has the Decoville, it has the layer of woven fuse, and it of course has the lining fabric. Then the pattern tells you to just go ahead and take your second lining panel and you're going to fuse the Decoville on the back of that one. And then you also want to take your two lining gusset pieces, which are right here, and they want you to fuse the Decoville to the back. Now of course I'm saying that I fused the Decoville. You're going to fuse whatever you chose. If you chose to use the Thermolam, you would be fusing the Thermolam to the back of this. If you're using the Decoville like me, then you would fuse that on there. And then this is the bottom piece for the gusset of the lining. And on that one, I fused a piece of Decoville Heavy. And with the Decoville Heavy, I do not cross over my seam lines. We're up to step number 2 on the printed pattern, and that is to work on the cargo pockets that go on the front of your bag. So you should have 4 pieces. You should have 2 exterior with the woven interfacing on the back, and then you should have 2 lining, and I have the woven interfacing on the back of both of my lining pieces. So take one of the exterior pieces because we need to install some snaps, and you're going to turn it over to the back side. And what you want to do is measure in 2 1/4 inches from each side and 1 1/4 inches down from the top and make a mark there. And that will be the placement for our snaps. I am using these 1/2 inch snaps from Clover. So you'll open the package, and after you open the package, you're going to take out the washers that are in there. And in the center of the washer, there's a little hole. And you're going to take that hole and place it over one of your marks. And then once you've done that, you need to make a mark in these slots here, one here and one here. And that will be where we make the cuts to put the little legs of the snap through. And then you'll move it over to the other hole. And you'll put that center hole right over the mark that you made there. And again, you're going to mark where the slots are. And then once you've done that, you're going to get yourself a little pair of sharp scissors. You can also do this with a seam ripper, whatever you're comfortable with. And you're going to cut out these slots. You want to be really careful. It's just a little snip in. Do that on both sides. Okay. And then what I also like to do is I like to take some sort of interfacing. I'm just going to use little scraps of the Decoville, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just mark in where these slots are right here and cut them out. And then after I do that, we're going to use that to help reinforce the snap. Now once you have the location marked for your snaps and you've cut out the little slots, you might want to take some fray check and turn your piece over. Find where you made your cuts and put some fray checks over those marks there so that that fabric does not fray on the front of your project. And then after you do that, you're going to take the female part of your snap and you're going to stick it into the hole. So the little legs will go in where those slots were. And then on this side, you're going to slip a piece of the interfacing over those slots. And then you're going to put the washer on. Okay, and then you're going to put it on a flat surface and you'll take a hammer and you're going to hammer those legs down. I'm not going to do it here because it's going to make a racket, but go ahead and hammer down your legs and then you can put in your second snap. I finished installing the snaps on both of the cargo pockets, and on one of them I hammered my little legs away from the center, and then on the other one I hammered my little legs towards the center of the snaps. I personally don't think it really matters which way you do it. I've seen people do it both ways, and I actually prefer having them hammered towards the center of the snaps. Now that we have our snaps in place, we can work on the pocket assembly. So according to the pattern, we need to strike a line right down the middle of the pocket. Now the pocket measures 9 inches across. So that means that you need to mark a line 4.5 inches down the center. And then once you've done that, they want you to mark another line that's 1 inch out from the center on each side. So you'll go 1 inch out from this side, mark a line, 1 inch out from this side, mark a line. And then after you've done that, you're going to take one of your lining pieces and put it right sides together with your pocket. And then you'll clip it in place. I like to use Wonder Clips, or you can pin it, whichever you prefer. And then you're going to sew all around. You will not sew the bottom, but you're going to sew up the side, across the top, and then down the opposite side. And you'll be using a 1/4 inch seam. Now I have the other pocket here. I've already sewn it together. And you can see my 1/4 inch seam up the side, across the top, and down the other side. And you want a back tack on each side. I used a stitch length that was about 2.4 millimeters. And then the next step is you need to clip your corners. So just clip as close as you can without clipping through your stitching. Do that on both sides. Okay, and then we're going to press these seams open. So I have my little ironing pad here. This little ironing pad is from Cricut and it works really well. So, and I have it on top of my self-healing mat. Now you never iron on top of your self-healing mat, otherwise you're going to be buying a new mat. But this little ironing pad works so well that it's actually safe for me to use it on top of my self-healing pad. So I open up my seam here and I just take my iron and press it down. and you'll go ahead and press all 4 sides. Now when I press, I usually only press one seam open and I leave the other. Now the next thing you want to do is turn this right side out. And then you're going to take one of your point turners and you're going to very gently coax out your corners. And now that I have it turned right side out, I'm just going to give it a good pressing. One thing you can do to help your seams along as you're pressing is you can roll them out with your fingers, and then you're just going to press. You can give it a little bit of steam if you want, and you want to go ahead and press all of your edges. Now that we have everything ironed, we're going to be using these marks we made before. So we have the center mark that we made, and then we have the marks that we made 1 inch out from each side of the center. So now what you're going to do is, on the outer lines that you marked, you're going to fold your pocket in half, and you're going to fold the lining right with the exterior. And then you want to press along that fold line. Try and make sure that your bottom and your top edges are nice and even. And then go ahead and give it a little bit of a press. And then you want to do the same thing on that second line right there. You want to fold it and press it. Now after you've pressed both of these fold lines, you want to go over to your sewing machine and you're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the edge on both of the fold lines. So here's the pocket. I've stitched about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of each fold. And I used a stitch length of about 3.0, and make sure that you back stitch at both the top and the bottom. And once you've completed that, you'll go back to your ironing pad again, and you want to press these folds right to the center line. So line them up and then press it down. And do that on both sides. You're meeting at the center line. And then after you've pressed it, you want to clip these in place with either some pins or Wonder Clips, whatever you prefer to use. And then you're going to go over to the sewing machine and you want to do a basting stitch along the bottom edge, and then you're going to top stitch along the top. She says 1/8 of an inch down. I actually went about a scant 1/4 of an inch down from the top. And then once you've completed that, this is what you should have. So my folds have been ironed towards the center, and I have my top stitching along the top of the pocket and my basting stitch at the bottom of the pocket. At this point, your pocket should be measuring about 6.5 inches across. And now you're going to take your pocket and you're going to mark a line on each side that's 3/4 of an inch from the edge. You'll do this on both sides, and then you're going to fold this down on that mark, and you're going to press it again. And then you're going to go over to your sewing machine and you're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. And again, I'll use my 3.0 stitch length for that. Make sure that you top stitch, or make sure that you back stitch at the top and the bottom. Do this on both sides. So then you'll mark this side and then you'll iron that down 3/4 of an inch. This is what your pocket should look like now. You should have formed that pleat in the center of the pocket, and then the edges of the pocket have been turned under 3/4 of an inch on each side, and everything has been top stitched approximately 1/8 of an inch from the edges of the folds. And this is what it looks like on the inside. So you have this sort of pleat in the center of the pocket, and you have these two little wings here. In the next step, you want to take your front panel C, that's your exterior fabric and the woven interfacing on the back, and this is the bottom half of the front of the bag. So what we need to do is mark some boxes for our cargo pocket placements. So what she would like you to do is mark 1 3/4 inches from the edge on each side and draw a line. And then from this line, you're going to measure over 5 inches and draw another line. And from the top, you're going to draw a line that's 1 1/4 inches down from the top. And that will form the box for the placement of your pockets. Now I did one additional mark, and that was to mark a center line here. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to make sure that my pockets, once I drew my boxes, were equally distanced from the center. And this panel is 14 inches wide, so I drew my line 7 inches down the center. Now, to place these pockets on, you have these little wings here. And what you're going to do is place the wings on the lines that you drew. Make sure they're nice and even, and then you'll be sewing right down here about 1/8 inch away from the edge. And then on this side, you'll mark the edge of this pocket up with this line here. Okay, and then again you'll sew about 1/8 inch down from there. And you're going to do that with both pockets. Now, you can pin this in place, so you could line this up, pin it in place, make sure that your raw edges are together down here. Or what I like to do is I'll take a little bit of sticky tape and I'll put some right next to the lines where I'm going to be sewing. And that will help hold down the pocket as I sew so that I don't have to do the pinning. Now this is the kind of sticky tape that's meant for sewing, so it's basting tape. You want to get yourself some sticky basting tape. I just finished sewing down the wings. I sewed everything 1/8 inch away from the edge, back stitch at the top and the bottom, and I used a stitch length of about 3.0, so I have all the edges sewn down. Now what you want to do is you're going to fold this kind of back so that this edge is matching up with this edge, and then you're going to press it, and what that's going to do is form a little pleat in the pocket. So just take your steam iron, and you probably want to give this a good shot of steam so that those pleats lay nice and flat. So I just give it a good shot of steam and I hold it for a few seconds, and I'm pressing down fairly hard. You can see that makes it lay nice. And you're going to do this on all the edges. And once you've finished pressing it, you'll just want to baste along the bottom of the pockets. Next we'll work on the flaps for the cargo pockets. So each pocket has a lining and a contrast piece, and I'm using the cork for my contrast piece. The first thing that you'll need to do is put the snaps onto the cargo pockets, and they go on the lining side. So you're going to mark a center line down the lining on the wrong side, and that should be centered, and that line is about 2 3/4 inches from each edge. That should mark your center. Then you're going to mark up 1 inch this way from the bottom of the flap, and the mark should be 1 1/4 inches out from the center line, and that is where you'll place your snaps. So you'll do exactly the same thing that you did before, where you took your little disc and placed it over the mark that you made, and then you'll mark everything and cut out and prepare for your snaps. Now the male snap will go on the lining. So when it's done, it should look like this. Okay? And then once you've done that, you're going to take your contrast piece, which is the outside of the flap, and you're going to put them right sides together, and then you're going to sew around with a 1/4 inch seam. So here's the cargo pocket all sewn with the 1/4 inch seam all around the bottom. You're going to leave the top open for now, and I've sewn with a 2.4 millimeter stitch. And make sure that you back stitch at both ends. So right here and right here, you need to make sure that you do your back stitching. Then the next thing I do is I take a pair of scissors and I will just cut in a few little V shapes where the curve is. So go ahead and cut out V's on both sides, and then we're going to iron the seams open and turn the flap inside out. To do the pressing, I just like to take my point turner or something, and I can run it all around the edge to help fold back that seam, and then you'll just take your iron and press it down. And I'm only going to open up the seam and press down the seam on the lining side. Now I've ironed the seams open on the lining side, and now I'm just going to turn it right side out. And you'll want to have your point turner here. Now I have to say something about this cork that I'm using. I purchased it from a different source than where I usually get it, and it's very stiff. The cork that I usually buy is nice and drapey, and it's very easy to turn things inside out. It's nice and flexible. This one is not. So when you choose a cork, make sure that you get something that is very flexible. You can see how stiff this is, and actually some of it seems to even be cracking, which is not good. So I'm using the round end of my turner, and I'm just trying to round that out. And then once I get this the way I like it, then I'll put it down on the ironing pad and give it a nice press all around. And then when it's done, you want to go over to your sewing machine, and you're going to sew 1/8 of an inch top stitching all around. And I did that from the cork side. And then you also want to baste the top of the pocket closed. And then when you're done with that, you'll take your front pocket panel with the cargo pockets on it, and you're going to snap it into place over one of the pockets, and then you'll take some Wonder Clips to secure it down, and you want to baste right along here, right along the raw edge, and make sure that the raw edge of your pocket and the raw edge of the bag are even before you start sewing. Now we're moving on to step 3 in the printed pattern, and that is to construct the front zippered pocket. So the first thing that you need to do is take your zipper tabs that you cut out, and they were cut out 1 inch by 3 inches, and it was an exterior fabric with the woven interfacing on the wrong side. Mine's a little bit wider because I'm using a wider zipper. But what she would like you to do is fold in one end of the zipper tab 1/2 inch and press it in, then fold the other half in 1/2 inch and press it down, and then fold the whole thing in half and give it a good press. Then you'll take that zipper tab and you're actually going to slip it over the end of the zipper. And then you'll stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, and make sure that you catch both sides. Now, I am not using the 14-inch zipper as the instructions say. I'm using a longer zipper that I'm cutting down. So this zipper is going to be attached to front panel A, and my zipper is slightly longer, so I need to make sure that my zipper is the exact length that it needs to be. So before I put on the other zipper tab here, I'm going to make sure that my zipper is the correct length, and I'm going to trim that down. So I finished trimming my zipper to the proper length, and now what I need to do is put the end of my zipper tab on the end of the zipper. So I'll just slip it over the ends like this. I'll slip both ends in there, and then I'm going to stitch across with the 1/8 inch stitch. And then once that's done, you're going to take your panel A and you'll put your zipper face down onto the bottom of panel A. And then you're going to stitch this across with a 1/4 inch seam. So of course my zipper tab will be here. So now the zipper tabs have been sewn on, And I have sewn the zipper to front panel A. You want to make sure that you sew it to the bottom of front panel A if you have a directional fabric. And you sew them right sides together. And right sides together means the exterior fabric facing up and the right side of the zipper, which has the zipper pull on it, facing down. And then you sew that with a 1/4 of an inch seam. And I used a 2.4 stitch length. Make sure that you back tack at both ends. Then you're going to take one of your front pocket panels. This is the lining. So it's a lining piece right here. This is the front pocket panel. And you want to pin that to the front panel A with the zipper sandwiched in between. And then you'll take it over to your sewing machine and you'll sew from this side, and you're going to follow the same exact line of stitching that you created when you sewed in the zipper. I have the front pocket lining sewn to front panel A with the zipper sandwiched in between, and I just followed my previous line of stitching. And now what I want to do is go over to my sewing machine, and I want to stitch 1/8 of an inch away from this edge right here. And then I'm going to flip that out of the way, and then I'm going to take my contrast piece B, and then I'm going to put that right side together with the zipper. Now this time the zipper pull will be up. So you're going to put it this way, and you're going to sew again with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I just finished stitching 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper, and I did not sew through the pocket piece. I only sewed through the exterior panel here and the zipper. And then I sewed down my contrast piece to the other side of the zipper. And then next you're going to take the remaining pocket piece and you're going to sew it to the other side of the zipper. So it will be on the other side of your contrast front B piece here. So you'll pin that in place, and then you'll go over to the sewing machine and follow that same line of stitching that you created when you sewed the front panel B to the zipper. So now I have the pocket lining, the second pocket lining, sewn to the opposite side of the contrast band here. And I followed the same line of stitching that I did when I sewed in the zipper. And the zipper is sandwiched in between. Let's take a look at what you should have so far, because it can be a little confusing. Right here you have your top panel A, and then underneath it is the pocket panel for the lining. And then here you have the contrast that you just sewed onto the zipper, and behind it you have the other pocket panel. Now if I turn it this way, you'll see that one of the panels is shorter than the other. These are the pocket panel linings. And what you're going to need to do is trim them up so that they're even, and then you're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam after you've trimmed this piece off. Okay? And you also have to make sure that before you do that, that you sew 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper on the contrast piece. And I do not sew through the pocket lining when I do that. So my 1/8 inch top stitching has been done on the contrast piece, and I have sewn the two lining pockets together with the 1/4 of an inch seam, and now all I have to do is trim off that excess. The sides of your pockets should be remaining open right now. Then the next step to finishing the front is to pin this piece with the cargo pockets to the contrasting band here. So we're going to flip all of this up out of the way, and then we can pin these two pieces together. You're going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then when you're done sewing you will top stitch right along the edge 1/8 of an inch on the contrast band. So here's the front of the bag all sewn together. I did my top stitching here on the cork. Now before you do that, you want to make sure that your seam that you just created is pressed up. towards the top of the bag, okay? And make sure that your pocket is out of the way when you're doing that top stitching. Now we can flip this back down, and you'll go back to your sewing machine, and you're going to baste just 1/4 of an inch away from each edge here, and that will close up the sides of your pockets. We're now moving on to step 4 in the pattern, which is to create the slip pocket on the back of the bag. So you have 2 pieces for this. You have the exterior slip pocket and the lining slip pocket. And what you're going to do is place them together, and you're going to sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam right along the top. And then after you've sewn it, you're just going to fold it back. You'll give it a nice pressing, and then you're going to go and top stitch along this edge here, 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, and then you're going to baste all the raw edges together. Then after you've done that, you'll take the back of the bag, which is the main panel for the back of the bag, and you're going to place them together. And you'll stitch these together with a 1/4 inch basting stitch. Make sure that you have all of your raw edges together. Then after that's basted on, you want to find the center of your slip pocket. So the slip pocket measures 14 inches. So the center point will be at 7 inches. And then from that center point, you're going to make a line that's about 1/2 inch down from the top of the slip pocket. And then you'll sew just a 1/2 inch stitch line and go back and forth over this a few times. And this is going to prevent the pocket from not sagging. So the back is done. I top stitched across the slip pocket here, and then I basted everything together. I think the next time I do this, I would probably put a snap here instead of doing the stitching line down here. Or the other thing you could do is make a little strap that comes down with a snap that snaps this close. Now you want to take one of the main lining pieces that has the fleece on it. This is the very first piece we worked on in the video, where we drew a box on the fleece and then cut it out and fused it to our lining. So what you want to do now is measure 3 inches down from this edge and draw a line right here. Then from that line you want to measure down another 1/2 inch, and then you need to find the center point. So this panel is 14 inches wide, so the center point here is at 7 inches. And then from this center point you want to measure out 4.5 inches and draw a line here, and then 4.5 inches out from this side and draw a line here. So what you should have now is a box that measures 9 inches wide by 1/2 inch deep. And it should be right in the center of the cutout box from the fleece. Then I went ahead and I drew a line right through the center of the box. So if you measure down 1/4 of an inch from this line here, you'll get this line. And then I stopped about 1/2 inch from the outer edge, and then I drew a little arrow shape to the line. And that will be our cutting line when we're ready to turn for the zipper. Now on this side, we're going to place one of the pocket pieces. So this is the interior pocket panel, and what you need to do is draw a line 2 inches down from the top and find the center point. So again, the center point is at 7 inches, so I drew a little center point here and a center point here. Then you need to find the center point of the pocket. So this panel is 11 inches wide, and the center point is at 5.5 inches. And I'm going to match this center point with the center point that I drew here, and I'm going to place it right on that line that we marked 2 inches down from the top. And then you're going to pin this in place, and after you have it pinned in place, you'll flip it over, and then you're going to sew right around this box. So right on the line that you drew. So I have sewn the opening for the zipper, and make sure that you do some back stitching. And then the next thing that you're going to do is flip it over and cut out that box. So what I like to do is fold it in half and then just make a little snip on the line that I drew. And that makes a little opening for me to get my scissors in there. Now when you're cutting this, you'll have to be very careful when you get up to that little arrow part that you don't snip into your stitching, but go as close to the corner as you possibly can. And then go ahead and cut the other side. And then when you're done with your cutting, you're going to push this through. All right, so then you're just going to go ahead and push this through to the other side. And these little rectangle tabs, if you give them a good tug, you should end up with a nice square corner. And then after you get everything pulled through, you're going to want to press this opening. So I have all this pressed down nicely now, and what I did after I pulled it through was I just pulled this back and I ironed this seam open, and then I ironed this seam open, and that helps everything to really lay flat. And then all you have to do is make sure that your edges are even. You can use your fingers to help roll it a little bit if you need to, and then just press it down very nicely. Now the next thing is we're going to put the zipper in the window opening. So to put the zipper on, I put some sticky tape, the basting tape again, on the zipper. You want to put it on the right side of the zipper, so the side with the zipper pull. And you take off the release paper. And then after the release paper is off, you're going to slip the zipper underneath this window. And you'll want to pull this back just a little bit because the zipper pull needs to be inside the window. Now my zipper is much longer than it needs to be, but that's okay. So I'm just going to line this up over my zipper, and you want the center of the zipper to be in the center of the window. So then you're going to go down to your sewing machine and you're going to sew a box all along here, and you want to stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric. And when I get to the corners here, I actually like to back tack it a little bit because the corners will have a lot of stress on it. I have the zipper sewn in here, and you want to make sure that you have caught your zipper tape before you do any trimming or cutting away. So now that I'm sure that everything is as it should be, I can cut off the excess zippers. And then I'm going to take the other pocket piece and place it right sides together with this one. And you're going to sew right around here. You're going to go up this side, across the top, and down this side, but you're going to leave the bottom open. And when I sew it, I like to have the piece down on the sewing machine this way, and then I just sew like this. Here are the two lining pocket pieces sewn together, right sides together, and I stitched 1/2 of an inch away from the edge, and you're only going to go along one side, across the top, and down the bottom. And I used a stitch length of 2.4 millimeters. Now we're up to step number 6, which is to construct the strap anchors. So you'll take one of your anchors. This is the exterior fabric with the woven on the inside. If you chose to use the contrast, you may be using a contrast piece right now. But you're going to take the piece, it's 2 inches wide by 3 inches long, and you're going to mark a line right down the center. So this would be at 1 inch away from the edge. And then you're going to take one of the edges and fold it right into that center line, and you'll press it, and then you're going to fold the other side into the center line and press. And now your piece should be 1 inch wide. Okay? And then after you do that, you'll fold it in half and give it a good pressing, and then you can slip your hardware into the strap anchor. And then you're going to go over to your sewing machine, and you'll sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge across the top and then 1/8 of an inch down the other side. And you're going to leave the raw edge open. And I actually like to stitch over mine twice. So I'll go ahead and stitch it, and then I'll stitch it again. And I'll go just as far as my presser foot allows me to go before I have to turn. Now we're on step number 7, which is to prepare the zip top panels. So I have them all here. You should have 2 exterior and 2 lining, and I have the woven interfacing on the back of each piece. Now the first thing that they want you to do is take each one of these and mark a line 3/4 of an inch away from this short edge right here. And then you're going to fold right on that line and press it down. So you'll want to do that on all of the edges. So on this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then you just want to make sure that everything is exactly the same length. And I believe that's approximately 12.5 inches. Now for my zipper panels, I'm using a zipper that was too long, so I cut it down. That means that I do not have a zipper stop. So here's my zipper pole, and I cut my zipper off up here, and there's no zipper stop. So this is a technique that I learned from Debbie Hunker, and I will link to her video below on how I can fold these out without a lot of bulk. So the first thing I did was draw a line straight across the zipper, and that's where I want my zipper to end. Then I'm going to fold back on one of those lines there, and I'm going to take some needle and thread and just tack that just a little bit. This doesn't have to be anything fancy here because the stitching is not going to stay in. Just pull it a little bit tight. I'm going to take one more stitch in there just to hold it well. Okay, and then once you've done that, you're going to take that white line where you've stitched it, and you're going to move it right up to the edge of the zipper teeth, right there. And then you're going to take your needle and thread again, and you're going to tack everything together. And put a few stitches in there just so that it holds for you. Then once you have one end secured, you're going to do the same thing to the other side. Just fold back right on that chalk line. And take a little stitch in here, a couple little stitches to hold it in place. And then you're going to fold that white chalk line right up to the edge of the zipper teeth like this. And then you will baste that in place. And now when you zip up your zipper, you've created a zipper stop that's not going to put a lot of bulk into your seam line. Now to sew the zipper to the first exterior panel, I have marked 1/2 inch from the finished edge, from the folded edge, and my zipper teeth are going to line up with that mark right there. So I take my zipper and I make sure that the zipper teeth are aligned with the mark, and then I'm going to pin all the way down the length, and I'll take it over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Now the zipper is going to hang off the edge, and that's exactly what you want it to do. I have this zipper sewn down to the exterior zipper panel, and I sewed with a 1/4 inch seam. And now the next thing I need to do is pin the lining piece over that exterior panel with the zipper sandwiched in between. Now when you do this, you want to make sure that your folded edges are together, and they need to be even at both ends. So if they're not, this would be the time to make the adjustment for that. And then you're going to sew that same way you sewed the zipper onto the exterior panel, and I'm going to turn mine over and follow my previous line of stitching. Here's the zipper sewn to the exterior with the lining on the other side. So what you want to do now is press both the lining and the exterior away from the zipper. And then you're going to go back to your sewing machine and you're going to edge stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge all along here, and then down this side and across the raw edge there. And you want to make sure that when you pin all this together that these edges are nice and even there. Okay? And then you're going to go and do the same exact thing to the other side of the zipper. And then when you're done with that, you'll prepare your zipper end for the end of the zipper, and you'll take the piece, it's the main zipper tab, and you want to fold in 1/2 inch on the short edge. So you'll fold that in and press, and then 1/2 inch on the other end, fold it in and press. Then you're going to mark a line right down the center of that zipper tab, and you're going to fold the long end towards that line. Then you'll fold the other long end in towards the line, and then you'll fold everything back. Then after you have your piece all nicely folded and pressed down, you're going to fold it in half one more time, and then that is going to slip right over the end of your zipper. And you'll sew around 1/8 of an inch from the edge all around the square box. Here's the completed zipper panel, and I have the zipper tab at the end. We're on step number 8 now, which is to prepare the pleated gussets. Now there are 4 of these pieces. You have 2 that are lining, and then you have 2 more that are your contrast, and the contrast pieces are the ones that go on the outside of the bag. Now at the bottom of each gusset there are 2 pleats. So on the pattern piece there are dotted lines. So you'll see these 2 dotted lines here and these 2 dotted lines here. What I did is I took my scissors and I just snipped right on the dotted line, and then I pulled these back. And then I laid it on top of my gusset, and then I just drew square boxes. And those are my markings for the pleats. So there it is. And then to be able to line this up properly at the sewing machine, I just took a very tiny snip in the edge of those pleats. So now when I fold these back to make the pleats, I can line up those little snip marks there. And then I held it in place with a wonder clip. So I did that pleat, and now you'll do the same thing with this pleat here, and then you'll hold that one in place with a wonder clip at the sewing machine. And then once you have the pleat properly aligned, you're going to sew. So you're going to sew right on this line here, the whole length of it, at 1/4 of an inch away from the edge here. You'll do that to both sides, and go over this a couple of times, like maybe 3 or 4 times. Once you have the pleats sewed in place, you're going to press them towards the center. So this one is going this way, this pleat's going this way, and then you just want to machine baste all across here, 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And then after you've done that to both sides, you can take the bottom panel, this is the bottom lining panel, and you can sew these together. So you're going to line it up on this side. I held mine in with wonder clips, and then you're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam. Now I've already prepared my exterior gussets, and this is what it looks like after it's been sewn. So on this side I sewed the 1/2 inch seam, and then on this side I stitched in 1/8 of an inch with my top stitching right here. And now here everything has been sewn together. So all the pleats have been sewn into the gussets, and the gussets have been sewn to the bottom panels for both the exterior and the lining. We're starting step number 9, which is really exciting because this is the assembly of the bag. So you're going to take both side panel pieces and you want to fold them in half and find the centers. So what I've done here is I've just folded it, found my center, and then I marked out a little notch on both sides. You want to do that on both of the side panels. And then you also need to do that on the front panel. So you can fold it in half or measure it and cut out a little notch like I did, or mark it with a pen or whatever. And you need to do that to both the front and to the back. So find all of your center points right now. So all my center points are marked. I have the center point at both ends of this panel, both the top and the bottom. And the next thing to do is to take your side panel and you're going to start pinning these pieces together. So I'm just matching up the little notch that I cut out. I'll put in a wonder clip. Then you're going to go ahead and clip this end of it. And then you'll clip the end on the other side. And after you have those 3 points clipped, you're going to start pinning or wonder clipping all the way down around the entire bag. And once you have that done, you're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam. Now when you're clipping and you get to this part, this rounded part down here, the secret to easing everything in is to round it around your fingers and then put in the clip. And as long as you're rounding it around your fingers, it should go in very smoothly with no puckers. And I like to put a lot of clips in that area. So go ahead and finish pinning the other side, and then you're going to do your 1/2 inch seam. I'm probably going to sew this with a stitch length of 3.0 because I am going through a good amount of bulk here. So I have everything clipped into place. This is the front panel and it's clipped now to the side panel. And I do use a lot of clips down in this area here. And I will be sewing from this side 1/2 of an inch away from the edge at a 3.0 stitch length. So I finished sewing the front panel to the side panel, and I actually went over my seam twice. So now you're going to turn this over, and then you're going to take the exterior panel that has the slip pocket in the back, and then you're going to pin that right sides together, matching up all your center marks just the way you did for the front. And you'll sew with the same 1/2 inch seam. I have the side panels sewn in on both the front and back of the exterior bag, and I also have everything sewn in for the lining. So there you go. Now when you're doing your rounded corners here, just take your time with it. Take your time pinning it into place and take your time sewing it. It will all come together. Now when you sew your lining, she wants you to start out at a 1/2 inch seam up at the top, and then as you get towards the bottom, you're going to work it into a 3/4 inch seam. And I did sew over all of my seams twice. So now the next thing that she wants you to do is trim all of your seams down to 1/4 of an inch. I've gone ahead and I've trimmed down all of my seams to 1/4 of an inch. Now this is the exterior part of the bag, and for right now you want to keep it with the wrong sides out. So you're going to go ahead and take one of the strap connectors and you're going to place it on one of the side panels, and then I'm going to clip it in place with a wonder clip. And then you'll go ahead and put the other one on the other side, and then you're going to base stitch this on with a 1/4 of an inch seam. Then while you're at it, you can also take your zipper panel and you want to unzip it all the way. Okay? And then it's going to go exterior side to the exterior side here. And you want to match up the center. So I have this little notch here that I had created before, and I have a little line here marking the center of my zipper tab, and then you're going to line those up and clip it in place. And then you're going to go ahead and clip it all the way to the end. And both ends of the zipper panel should be about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the bag, right there. So go ahead and finish putting this in. Then you'll go ahead and baste this with a 1/4 of an inch seam, and then you can also go ahead and pin this side in place and baste this side in with a 1/4 of an inch seam. The anchors are now basted in place and the zipper panels basted in place. You want to make sure that when you baste this zipper panel in place that you did not get this end of the zipper twisted. Okay, it's easy to do because you've opened up the zipper before you've basted it in. Okay, now it gets really exciting because we're actually going to sew the exterior to the lining. So you want to take your exterior piece and you want to turn it inside out. Okay, now the next part is really important. You want to take your lining piece and you're going to keep it wrong side out. But you want to unzip the zipper pocket all the way. And the reason why is because if you remember, we left an opening at the bottom here. And once this piece gets sewn to the exterior, we're going to turn the entire bag through this opening. So if you sew it without the zipper open, you're going to have a big problem. Okay, so you're going to take your main bag and you're going to slip it inside of the lining. And make sure that the pocket side of the bag is on the opposite side of the zipper pocket in here. And then you're going to make sure that your anchors and your zipper panel are sandwiched in between both the exterior and the lining. And you want to go ahead and clip or pin all of your side seams together, match those up. Match all of your center points, all of your side seams, and then you're going to sew around with a 1/2 inch seam. When you get to where your anchors are, go over that seam a few times, like maybe 2 or 3 times. And then when you're done, and you're sure that everything is right, you're going to trim that 1/2 inch seam down to 1/4 of an inch. But you're not going to trim the side where the anchors are. You'll leave those as they are. So basically you'll just be trimming this side and the opposite side. Okay, the exterior and the lining are all sewn together now, and I am going to try and pull this through the pocket. Now, I've never done this before, so this is going to be kind of interesting. I have no idea what to expect. Usually I just leave something open in the lining and then I close the lining. But this is how the pattern says to do it, and I was following the pattern exactly. So let's give this a try. I'm just going to pull through. Pulling through the pocket here. I'm just going to reach in and push these edges out. Okay, and then what you'll do is you'll pull this out, this pocket out, and you'll close up this pocket. So I would just turn the edges down 1/4 inch and then just stitch across the bottom. But I'm just going to put it in there for now. Okay, wasn't too terrible. Now I'm going to push the lining into the bag. So that was a bit of a struggle, but I did get it turned right side out. Now the only thing left for us to do is the strap. You do want to really give this a good pressing. You know, open this up and, you know, pull this nice and taut, and then give it a really good pressing, and then you can go and stitch 1/8 inch away from the edge here. Do not catch your zipper tabs or your anchors into that seam when you do your top stitching here. I did some top stitching all around the top of the bag, and to do that I actually turned the bag with the lining side out so the interior was on the inside of the bag again, and then I went and stitched on the exterior side all the way around. Now our last step is to finish the strap. So what you're going to do is take the 2 pieces for the strap. You have 2 30-inch pieces, and you want to sew them together end to end, and you're going to take the whole length and you're going to fold it in half and press all along the length. Then you're going to open it up, then you'll press 1/2 towards the crease in the center all along the length, and then you'll go on the other side and press that half towards the center along the length. And when you're done with that, you're going to fold the whole piece in half with these finished edges together, these finished folded edges together, and then you're going to press that along the entire length. Then you'll go over to your sewing machine and you're going to edge stitch all around the entire strap. So now we're going to put the hardware onto the strap. So you're going to start by taking a slider and you're going to thread it through one end of the slider, and then you will thread it down through the other side of the slider. Then you want to take your end here and fold it like this, maybe about down, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch or so, and then you're going to sew it right here. I am going to use rivets on mine, so I'm just going to clip it in place right now with a Wonder Clip. So this is how it should look right now. Okay? Then you're going to find the other end of your strap and you're going to slip an anchor, one of the swivel anchors, onto it. Okay, and then you can thread that through up close to where the slider is. And this is what it should look like right now. Okay? Then you're going to find the other end of your strap again. Okay? And you're going to go back over to your slider and you're going to come up through one side of the slider, and then you're going to go down through the other end of the slider. Okay? And then you're going to take the other swivel anchor and you're going to put the end of your strap through there, and you're going to fold it down about another 1/2 inch and then fold it over, and then you're going to sew right here or use rivets. So I'm just going to hold it in place with the clips. And then you'll just check to make sure that nothing is twisted after putting on the hardware. So everything should be laying nice and straight and not twisted. Okay, so there you go. You have your 2 swivels and you have your slider. Okay, now the next thing for you to do is go ahead and sew everything into place, or rivet everything into place, and then just clip it onto your bag. So, there you go. You have made a Sydney crossbody bag. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed watching this tutorial, and I hope that it's been helpful to you. Please like and subscribe.